Niger with another corner. Whipped in. Nabbi got the delivery in the opening goal of the game. Niger break the deadlock. 1-0. Terrific header. Really was. And it's that man, Zayn on target for the second game running.
Hello and welcome along to the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your host, Nabbi. And boy, oh boy, do we have a bumper edition of the show today. It is Afcon qualification time. I'm incredibly happy being South African, seeing Bafana qualify. We will be in Morocco. We will be enjoying Christmas in Morocco. Ali, you're loyal, you're proud, but unfortunately, we know where the Kenyans will be at Christmas.
Zayn, I'm wearing my Kenya top to kind of like reassure myself, I think, and remind myself that, these are dark days. Obviously, it's been a bit embarrassing. Both, Uganda and Tanzania, our neighbors, have qualified for the Afcon, and for us, the only solace I can have is that 2027, we will qualify because we're hosting it. So unless Kenya finds a way of somehow becoming the first country in football history to not qualify for the tournament they're hosting, we'll at least be there. But yeah, it's a sad day for me in the Afcon qualifiers.
Well, listen, Ali, we're certainly not going to rub any salt in those wounds. And just for those of you listening out there, Alasdair is our cross-platform reporter. He's a host. He has an encyclopedic knowledge on African football. I'm sure you'll get to flex that during the show. So, Alasdair Howorth, always a pleasure to see you. Now, before we get into the Afcon qualifiers, and there's a lot we can dig our teeth into, I want to rewind a little bit because we had a podcast last week about the racial abuse Rulani Mokoena faced in Morocco. He took to social media, or rather the club released a statement, and there were lots of social media reports about him being racially abused by a member of the opposition bench while he was coaching for Wydad last weekend. I did the podcast with Courtney talking about it. Obviously, at On the Whistle, we stand against all forms of discrimination, and we're glad to give this subject the necessary time it merited for a discussion. And we've had some wonderful feedback from people out there on YouTube, on our Twitter accounts, on Instagram. And if you want to get in touch with us, all you have to do is search for the On the Whistle podcast on YouTube or Facebook, or look for us on X, look for us on Instagram, look for us on TikTok at OTW_podcast. So, Alasdair, for the purposes of our audience and you, I'm going to read back some of those comments that we had from our YouTube account. First off, we have loyal listener Tete Molefe, and Tete said, "Great content as always. You've summed up the Wydad situation so well. I believe Mokoena will get this right in Morocco, and we hope the league makes a strong statement against racism." Tete, thank you for that comment. We also had Adam Aziz, a loyal member of our community and fan of the show. And Adam said, "It's very sad. No manager or player should still face racism." We also had a comment from a newcomer in Galaxy. Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it. I'm going to read it out now. And it said, "It's an isolated incident for Mokoena. You have the right to be upset and express your anger, but I can assure you that the individual involved does not represent the whole country, and he should be investigated and convicted if proven guilty. Morocco is a melting pot of cultures, and people of all shades coexist in peace. Good luck, coach, and don't let this stop you from doing what you know, and that's winning." Well, gentlemen, and Galaxy, I don't know who you are. Thank you very much for those comments. Certainly wonderful to hear from you. And please, guys, keep them coming. We love to have you speak around our braai. Remember, we're Africa's biggest virtual braai. Ali, we've waited long enough. Now it's time to get into the qualifiers. I mean, where else but starting but African powerhouse Ghana? They have not qualified for the Afcon. I can't believe those words are leaving my mouth. Tell us what went wrong on the pitch.
Zayn, oh my goodness. I think there's not really anywhere for you to, it's so hard to kind of sum it up because, like you said, it's just gobsmacking. It genuinely is like jaw defying. This is a team that 14 years ago was on the verge of a World Cup semi-final. You know, this is the first time they haven't made the Afcon in 2004. And I remember being at the Afcon, you know, most recently in Cote d'Ivoire. You know, I thought this is the lowest ebb for Ghana. They've gone back-to-back tournaments being knocked out in the group stage. That is a humiliation. You know, this is one of the most historied countries in African football. You know, it does not get, you don't get higher pedigree than Ghana. You know, then you're into the likes of Egypt, Cameroon. You know, this is proper Afcon heritage. And here we are just a few months later, you know, talking about how they've been knocked out of the Afcon, not even when the tournament started. And Zayn, it gets worse than that because, you know, the headline is that they didn't qualify. Zayn, let's be absolutely clear. They've come bottom of this group, okay? And look, especially at this pod, we champion the underdogs. We celebrate, you know, and we lift up a lot of those voices. Angola topped the group, and Angola, we have to give them their flowers. They've been excellent. We've had Pedro Gonçalves on this podcast, the coach, talking through how good this Angola side is. Obviously, but, you know, then you look at the other. Sudan is a nation that has been homeless for 18 months. Okay, they can't even play in Sudan. Most of their players have hardly played over the last year. And then you have Niger, which is a team where not even everyone who plays for Niger is fully professional. You know, this is, in all senses, like a semi-professional national team. And they've come and beat Ghana on their own patch. I mean, you say on the pitch, there's so many issues on the pitch. In terms of the squad building. And
well, we have to move it off the pitch pretty quickly because it's been just as dramatic there, if not worse.
Exactly. And I think that's where this ultimately comes down to, because you look at their players on the pitch, you look at the squad that they've got, some of the players, particularly that attack, you know, you've got essentially a front four of Inaki Williams, excellent La Liga striker, Antoine Semenyo, excellent, you know, winger stroke forward in the Premier League. It's probably going to be moving, you know, could easily be moving to somewhere like Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea in the next couple of years. You've got Ernest Nuamwa, you know, Leon almost signed for Everton, high class player. You have Mohamed Kudus, who in my opinion is, you know, the heir to Mo Salah's throne in terms of being the best player in Africa. Sensational talent. And you've got players like Abdel Fattah, you know, Jordan Ayew is still an excellent Premier League player, you know, coming off the bench. But the team is unbalanced. But Zayn, again, we've talked about the team, but the issues are off the pitch. You know, the issues are deep embedded in this FA. You know, we spoke about Kirk Okraku, you know, coming into the dressing room before their last round of fixtures and lambasting the team. When who's the one who's failed to provide you know, high level, excellent training center that you see in other countries across the continent? Who's the one who's failed to, you know, provide the support for coaches and the infrastructure for coaches to come in? Who's the one who sacked a homegrown coach on the verge of the Afcon only to bring in a guy who took them to 2010 quarterfinals, but hasn't done anything since? You know, there's just been poor decision-making after poor decision-making. And it's embarrassing, to be honest, for Ghana, for a country that has aspirations to be regulars at the World Cup, competing for the Afcon every single time. And I think that's where the issues. I mean, you even look at the women's side of the game. They didn't qualify for the last WAFCON. Their under-17s are currently banned from playing by FIFA because of fielding overage players. You know, this is not an on-the-pitch issue. This is a chronic off-the-pitch issue. This is a chronic FA issue. This is a chronic issue with Ghanaian football, and it, you know, it has to change. And what has to happen, in my opinion, is, well, I think the FA should go. They need to, you know, resign immediately and let in some new blood, because clearly this is unfeasible. But they need, whoever is actually in charge in the next couple of weeks, there needs to be a hard reset. There needs to be and not a hard reset by sacking the coach, getting rid of some of the, you know, foreign-based players, you know, doing these kind of populisty moves, but actually thinking, how do we restructure this country from bottom to top in a way that, you know, produces talent in Ghana, and we've seen that they can in the likes of Kudus and likes of Ernest Noah, but then also is recruiting from abroad, because that's the other thing, is we've seen this kind of comical attempts to bring in the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi or Eddie Nketiah, when it's like, you should be communicating with these guys when they're 14, 15, trying to bring them into the Ghanaian setup, not waiting until England have rejected them. So it's just been kind of one disappointment after another. We saw the way in which they hamstrung, you know, Chris Hughton and now Otto Addo, and he's the one who's taking the brunt of this. But it is so shameful. And, you know, effectively, you know, they're done for the next couple of years, because I can't see them qualifying for the World Cup either. So they have to look at themselves and say, okay, we've got until the next AFCON in 2027 to figure this out.
Well, you touched on Otto Addo and him taking the brunt of it. There have been some tense conversations and exchanges with him and the media. I was just looking at Ghanaian football expert Gary Alsman's timeline. I know some of those visuals are out there for people when he was going through his credentials. And effectively, the journalist said, well, you're better at scouting than coaching. So there's a real tense heatedness. I think you've made some sensible suggestions around restructuring. But for those who don't know the incident I'm talking to and some of those, heated moments between him and the media, what have they made for viewing from your perspective, Alasdair?
I mean, Zayn, one of my kind of poignant memories of being at the Afcon was actually the post-match press conferences in the Ghana games particularly after obviously the Mozambique draw when they got knocked out in such dramatic circumstances, letting into, injury time equalizer or 2 goals that, obviously one of them was the equalizer. The hostility in that room between, at the time it was Chris Hughton and the journalist, and the players was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. There was genuinely it looked like it could get violent, and in fact, in some senses, it almost did. Where in the mix zone, where the players were obviously distraught, ignoring the media because they were kind of obviously upset. Look, fair enough. You can say whether they should be ignoring the media or not. You'd hope that some of the players could front up. There was journalists grabbing the players and demanding that they speak to them. And we're seeing the exact same scenes. And again,
Crazy.
This for me. Exactly. And for me, and we've seen the same, the clips you're talking about of in the press conference, journalists just standing up and telling Otto Addo, you don't even have any coaching qualifications. And Otto Addo being forced to outline the fact that he's been a coach for the last kind of decade and a half in Germany at some of the best clubs in the world, at Dortmund. Yes, he worked as a scout, but he's also a coach. And also, let's not forget that he was not the one who initially wanted to come in and be the head coach of Ghana. He was essentially asked to come do it because they couldn't get anyone else after Chris Hughton left. So, to put it on him, and then later for him to be, caught up with another journalist arguing in the mix zone, for me, that points to such a kind of a negative environment where there's no trust between the media and the FA. There's no one speaking. There's no one from the FA. Kurt Okaku will go and yell at his players and they'll post it online. So it looks like he's doing something. But will he face up to the media? Will he be the one in the mix zones? No, it's Otto Addo, it's Kudus, it's Jordan Ayew, it's the players and the manager who have to front up. And I think you can almost always see, and obviously this is me coming at it from a journalist perspective, so I'm biased, but you can always see almost always see how a team is thriving by the way it interacts with the media. Because if it's cold fronting them, if it's cold giving them the cold shoulder, either it's the media is not doing its job because it's being aggressive and it's being, or the FA itself is the one they're not giving any access. They're not building relationships or anything. And it's so clearly both here because there's no relationship between the media and the players and the coaching staff and the FA that is in a healthy kind of strong place. So it's shameful both, well, mainly on the media people's part, but you can also understand because the way the federation has been run has been so embarrassing.
Well, listen, Ali, I think that's a great summation of everything going on with Ghana at the moment, and I'm sure we could dedicate a podcast to it, but we must move on. And we're going to move on to something inspirational. But first, I want to read a quote to you, and this was from the UN Secretary General. He said this last month. The Sudanese population were trapped in a nightmare of violence, hunger, disease, and displacement. He said that about almost 25 million people in the country were in need of humanitarian assistance. However, despite the civil war, despite all those issues, Sudan have qualified for the Afcon incredibly, and I guess in a way to link it back to our previous story, the current Sudan head coach is Ghanaian James Kwesi Appiah.
Yeah, it's the kind of poetic kind of, I don't know, justice or kind of humor is incredible, isn't it? That the Ghanaian manager who'd kind of been outcast from the Ghanaian football, he managed them twice, has then gone to Sudan and is the one who kind of drives the knife into the Ghanaian FA as Sudan qualifies. Zayn, look, for everything that Ghana is miserable and, I hope that things change because it's a wonderful footballing country. Sudan it's incredible, the story. Yeah, I mean, like almost 18 months, 19 months now on from April last year when the civil war broke out. that this country that these players have effectively been homeless as a national team. You know, they've had to base themselves in Taif, in the city in Saudi Arabia. Essentially, the Saudi government has opened their arms to them. And you look, we can often, and lots of people are very critical of the Saudi government for a lot of things they do in football. This is something that's an amazing thing they've done, opening up to Sudan. Same with Libya. So when the Sudanese league kind of collapsed because of the civil war, essentially they released all the players on their contracts, and a lot of Libyan clubs signed those players. And kind of partially because they're good players and you can sign them, but also kind of to essentially like facilitate those players escaping the civil war and bringing their families or supporting their families back home by giving them salaries and things like that. They played a lot of their home games in Libya. They played a lot in South Sudan, which again, testament to that, because obviously the relationship between Sudan and South Sudan is very, very tense, given, you know, they only seceded from Sudan, 10 years ago. And on top of that, Al Hilal, Al Merrikh, the two clubs that kind of dominate Sudanese football, where most of the players come from, have had to move, was it like 4,000, 5,000 kilometers away to play in the Mauritanian League, all the way on the western coast of Africa. And again, this is homeless Sudan. This is not like, I don't know, Senegal or the Comoros. This is not a team full of diaspora players. I think they have like 3 players who are from the diaspora. I think 85% of their players play for Sudanese clubs, or have done in the last year prior to the invasion. So like them losing the league has been huge. And yet, Zayn, they've been able to do the unthinkable, which is qualify out of this group and qualify ahead of one of the most kind of decorated club nations in Africa.
I mean, you've given us incredible context there, but how do they do this? This is mind-boggling. It's mind-bending.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things, right? They've brought in an excellent coach, Kwesi Appiah, who's done excellent things. They have what they have done, and this is something that is different for Sudan, is they have started to look abroad. They have started to look at the diaspora. So kind of 2 good examples are Mohammed and Abu Isa, the brothers, born and raised in the UK, to Sudanese family. They've started playing for the Sudan national team. I think between them, they scored 4 or 5 goals in the last year since they've joined. So they've been a huge impact. So there's been that kind of combination, bringing in a new coach with fresh ideas, bringing in new players. And I think they are now working towards integrating more and more diaspora players, because, that is a way for them to thrive. But I think, a lot of it is this kind of conflict have brought them together in kind of unimaginable ways. And they've said that, players have said that actually genuinely, and I know this is quite a trite thing to say, and oftentimes we speak about it in football, but they say genuinely, when the Jedin Falcons play, civil war stops. Everyone watches. Everyone wants this team to thrive, and there is a weight and a power to that. And it's very, very kind of reminiscent of what happened in Cote d'Ivoire when the Ivorian national team qualifies for the World Cup. Didier Drogba goes on national TV with the players and begs everyone to lay down their arms, and that's replayed for months and months, and that kind of plays its part in ending the civil war. It's that same energy of this is something that unites an entire nation. And then again, fair play to Libyans, to Libyan fans, because even when they're playing in Libya, they're still getting 10,000 fans into these games. A lot of countries in Africa, Kenya included, have had to play their home games outside of their home countries. We played a lot in Uganda recently, and those stadiums tend to be empty. They tend to not be home games. They're neutral games. But for Sudan, they've managed to make a home in Libya, and so they are still playing home games. And I think that takes teams by surprise. And so, it's just this wonderful combination of kind of intelligent recruitment, bringing in the right players, bringing in the right coach, as well as just this incredible unity and strength of character that this team has kind of been forced to develop. And it's just an incredible story.
And listen, a story that we are going to do more on the On the Whistle podcast, because as you say, on the field, politically, in the country, an inspiring story, and certainly one of a case where sport can do more. And we have a cameo appearance at a really good time. Hey, do you know who... Say hi, Uncle Ali. We're doing a podcast, okay? Do you know that South Africa qualified for the Africa Cup of Nations? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Are you excited about that?
Yeah.
So, what's behind us? What did you help decorate? What's that? What's that behind us? Is it a Christmas tree? Yeah.
Christmas tree.
And Uncle Ali hasn't even got his up or said anything about our one, because it's Christmas here when you have youngins like this in the house. But next Christmas, shall we go to Morocco? Next year to watch the football?
I want to go C to get you.
Okay. My son wants to take the C2C train, and those of you who don't live here in the United Kingdom, the C2C train takes you to other areas outside of London, and he wants to go visit a friend of ours and his uncle Lexi. But we're going to get into Bafana right now. I'll ask you the question, then I'll deal with this, Ali, because we're going to keep the pod going, because there's nothing better than a live pod or pre-taped live pod. Bafana qualified. I'm over the moon. I mean, it's incredible. They've done it with games to spare. They're looking reasonably good. A good locally based pool of players. And in Hugo Bruce, let's be honest, he hasn't had the most enjoyable time there, but he's done excellent work with the national team, and they're closing in. He's closing in on a record of being the longest-serving coach in modern history since not Sir Clive Barker, but Clive the Dog Barker. So
he might as well be Sir Clive Barker. He's done more than any other knight that I know of.
Yeah. But what's your take on Bafana, their qualification? I mean, certainly this team is trending in the right direction.
Zayn, it's like, I'll tell you what, it's super impressive. Like to see this team. I mean, let's not forget this is a team that didn't even qualify for the 2021 Afcon. This is a team that was kind of at a low ebb, and as well as off the pitch, more nonsense. South Africa isn't excused. We've seen Danny Jordan is currently in court to. And we'll wait to see what happens there to see if he's even the FA president come, a few weeks, months, years down the road. But Hugo Bruce has quietly been fantastic, and like you said, it's not been easy. He's come under a lot of pressure, and been put in really difficult positions by the FA. When he took over, one thing that really struck me was when he took over Bafana home games. You would see empty stands all over the place. It looked like, who was even coming to watch here? Why are we even hosting this in FMB or wherever, some of these mega stadiums? And yet, this game, qualifier against South Sudan, they've already qualified. Essentially, this is a dead rubber. Stadium sold out. That brought such a smile to my face because Bafana, look, Zayn, I know you'll tell me different because I know you're a rugby guy. You'll tell me, Springboks this, Springboks that. South Africa is a football nation.
Oh,
okay?
No.
I know you're successful at rugby.
Wait a minute. We're a football country first. Let's get that very clear.
Exactly.
We love our rugby. We love our cricket. We love our athletics. But we are a football country first. We're not like Kenyans. We don't run first and play football second. We are football first.
Exactly. And so for me, that brought a smile to my face because let's be honest, Bafana have not brought a smile to South African faces for a long time. And the Springboks have stepped up in their place, but it's been great to see. And like you mentioned, I also think it's really interesting that this is a PSL team. I think Siobanga Ngezana is the only one who in the starting 11 today that doesn't play in the PSL. And he came from Kaizer Chiefs to FCFB in Romania. And so when and it's interesting because it's at a time where you've got these guys, Bonka Kule Hlongwane in Jabulu Blom in the US doing kind of all right in patches. You've got Lyle Foster is kind of had it up and down time at Burnley, but we've seen that he's so quality. If he can stay fit, if he can stay kind of present, he's a Premier League player there. And yet Hugo Bruce said, no, I'm not dealing with this. I'm building my team. And we're going to be successful. And that's what he does better than anyone else. I mean, it's a shame Francis isn't here to tell us, but, that 2017 Cameroon team was not up to anything good. That was one of the worst teams to ever win the Afcon. And yet they played good football. They played simple football. They relied on good wingers like Christian Bassagog and Vincent Aboubakar playing up front. It was simple football, but Hugo Bruce knows how to put together a tight team and a team that does well. And look, Bafana aren't going to go into the Afcon as one of the favorites, but the semi-final.
You don't want to run up against them. You don't want to.
Absolutely, and we saw that in the last Afcon with Morocco, who were flying high. One of the favorites, and suddenly, boom, they got hit by that South African sucker punch. And I think Bafana can do that to anyone. And I think they'll go into the Afcon this time for the first time in a long time as a team to be taken really seriously, because even coming into this last Afcon, there were still question marks. We weren't sure what was going to happen. They lost in that first game against Mali. But since then, we were talking even off the pod, aside from that loss to Mali in the first game of the Afcon, Bafana haven't lost a single game this calendar year in 90 minutes. That is amazing. For a nation and in an Afcon year, not just like, and you've not had any friendlies in that time either. It's all been Afcon World Cup qualifiers or Afcon qualifiers. And yet Bafana have managed to not lose a single game aside from that first one in 90 minutes. So I think Bafana, it's looking up.
You know what I love about this, Ali, is that when you join the pod, you're like, there are too many South African football experts.
Amen.
It looks like, the apple hasn't fallen too far from the tree, or we've just rubbed up on you. But look, there's two things I want to say. One is you've given fantastic analysis on Bruce and the team, but obviously we have a federation where there are some serious allegations and problems off the field. We know that SAFA president, Danny Jordan, there are allegations of fraud and money embezzlement against him in the federation. He is obviously seeking to clear his name because he seeks a fourth term of office. So we will wait to see what will transpire and happen there. But despite all that drama off the field, Bafana doing the business on it with Mr. Bruce. Now, Ali, in the break, I actually got a call from Courtney Freeze, and he wanted me to check with you if you were opening our Patreon account, and I'll ask you why.
Why is this, Zayn?
Because we don't usually talk our financials on a pod, right? But we're doing it right now. Because I believe you're starting it to ensure you can start building up that budget to travel to the Comoros to do your story on their rise in African football.
Look, Zayn, my parents used to travel to the Comoros a lot for work. So I can tell you, Comoros was one of the first football shirts I ever owned, was a Comorian football shirt. All me and my brothers.
Incredible.
I'll tell you what, the flights aren't cheap. So if listeners are watching, it's a lot of money. Now, Zayn, this is another incredible story. This is an island, an island chain, archipelago that has 500,000 people on it. Has almost no grass on the entire island, is one of the most impoverished countries in the world, and yet have qualified for a second Afcon. I mean, we've had Fouad Bashiru, one of a kind of legendary golden generation of the Comoros that qualified them for the first Afcon in Cameroon on the pod. And people like him, and I've spoken to Yusuf Mchangama, who's obviously a legend there as well and is still a part of the team. They were saying back in 2010 when they first were invited into the national setup, they didn't even have training kits. They were saying we're coming from France and we were all wearing different like Barca or Marseille kits because we didn't even have training kits. We didn't have bibs. We didn't have anything. They didn't have a football pitch. And yet 14 years later, they've got a stadium that is, a difficult place to go to. Ask Ghana in the World Cup qualifiers. They lost there. They've got a team that, again, has an incredible sense of kind of connection with each other. And what I love is that not only have they kind of succeeded at the first Afcon and had a brilliant coach, Amir Abdou, let's be honest, he's the reason that they've had all this success. He's the reason why they've done so well. But they've gone and built from when he left. When he went to go to Mauritania, I was really worried about the Comoros. I thought, the FA is still had problems. Even as recently as just over a year ago, the players threatened to go on strike because of, there weren't good conditions for them to work in. And so I was worried when Amir Abdou goes, this is all going to fall apart. This is all going to fall apart. But since then, they brought in new players, they brought in young players, they brought in the likes of Yassine Borhain, Faisal, they've got some older guys like Faisal Amani and Bakari who are still a part of the team, but they brought in youngsters. They look to that diaspora, players like Miazan Maulida who scored a couple goals earlier in the qualifiers. They put together a team that can compete again. And, that is just like, it's amazing, Zayd. Like, it genuinely is like mind boggling that this country has been able to do this. And Zayd, not only have they qualified, they topped the group with Tunisia. Again, this is not an easy group. They topped the group with Tunisia and Gambia, who've been at the last two Afcons as well. And it's just remarkable. And they've done it again with Stefano Cousin, almost a no-name manager from Italy. I think he's only the second Italian to actually qualify for the Afcon. He was managing South Sudan last year and has come to the Afcon. So it's not like they're doing this with bringing in big names. But again, it is one of the most incredible stories. And I think people have almost been blunted to the impressive nature of some of these qualifications over the last years. I'm thinking of the Gambia. Even the fact that Comoros beating Gambia in qualifiers is a big deal. Is a testament to Gambia, who, just a couple of years ago were, even at the last Afcon, having qualified for the Afcon, they were so lowly ranked, they had to go through preliminary qualifiers as a team that reached the quarterfinals of the previous tournament. They had to play in the preliminaries because they were so lowly ranked. Even Mauritania, 10, 15 years ago, were ranked down with San Marino as the worst teams in the world. I think they were the third worst ranked team in the world just about 12 years ago or something. So this is why I love African football, because some of these other nations like Ghana, Nigeria have struggled. Tunisia, we just mentioned, aren't super well run. These countries are a bit of a mess. When you're a small nation, if you get it right, you will be rewarded. And it's just been incredible to see. And thanks to, look, I'm very critical of Gianni Infantino and FIFA, but a lot of it is thanks to the funding that they provide. It means that suddenly these small nations, if they do things right, they can compete. And I just think it's incredible. And I think we need to celebrate these stories like your Mauritanias, like your Comoros. It is amazing to see.
I gotta agree, Ali. Incredible stories to tell. No, we're not going to have another intervention from my son. We're going to keep the pod going. I want to ask you more questions around this qualification group. One more, and then we can start looking ahead to the actual Afcon. Well, still a long way off, but just look at some big picture stuff. But I got to ask you about Tanzania, another success story on the continent, an absolutely amazing, vibrant local league. They knock out Guinea, despite Guinea having Cyril Girassi. He's the top scorer. I guess this is a moment where the Simba and Yanga fans can be very, very excited because Tanzania are going to the Afcon.
Yeah, there's not many things that can unite Simba and Yanga, but the national team will do that. Now, Zayn, again, it's a testament to Tanzania, and the good work they did. Yes, they were a disappointment at the last Afcon. They sacked their manager halfway through it, and they kind of didn't score a single goal and kind of stunk up the place. But it's back-to-back Afcon qualifications. It's their third Afcon in 4 attempts, and we know that they'll be at the next one because they're hosting it. So it's 4 and 5. And it is just a huge testament to what has been happening in Tanzania over the last kind of 5, 6, 7 years. We've had guys on from Simba and Yanga speaking about the kind of brilliant work they've been on. I was lucky enough to be at the Kariako Derby back in April. This is, like you said, it's a vibrant footballing nation, and it's one that I think provides us with such a different path. When all these countries are looking for, diaspora players, are looking to see how do we get players into Europe. Tanzania is saying, no, we're building our home in Tanzania. We're building it here. We're going to thrive here. And we're gonna kind of grow as a country. And look, Tanzania is an extremely nationalistic country, for better or for worse. I think in many ways I'm very jealous of it as a Kenyan. So I think it's not necessarily the template for all countries, because I don't think, say for instance in Kenya, it would work. I just don't think as a country we could kind of do that. But it's amazing what they've done. I think a couple concerns I would have when thinking about Tanzania is, yes, they've kind of been great. They've been good at qualifying, and they've got 2 big Nick clubs in Simba and Yanga. When I look at this team, it's not a young team, and I think that's where my only question marks with Tanzania is they've kind of developed this vibrant local league. They've got 2 big clubs now competing in the CAF Champions League and Confederations Cup, but when I look at, say, for instance, the starting 11 of their game today where they beat Guinea, it's only really Clement and Zize who kind of stands out to me as, okay, there's a youngster who's coming through at Yanga who looks exciting. So I think they've still got work to do in terms of developing pathways. But we've seen on their women's side, their U17 team went to the semifinals of the Women's World Cup at the U17. They qualified for the WAFCON. Tanzania, it's got a lot of flaws still in terms of a footballing climate, a culture. I don't want to say that it's perfect and it's doing everything perfect, but Zayn is moving in the right direction. And it's, for them to beat a team like Guinea with, like you said, Cyril Girassi, 6 goals in 6 games, I think, was the top goal scorer before Brahim Diaz scored 4 goals against Lesotho and overtook him, which, stat padding against Lesotho feels a bit unfair on Girassi. But, and Guinea went to the quarterfinals of the Afcon. And they almost beat DRC. They're so close to getting to the semifinals, and yet they won't be at the next Afcon. And in huge part that's because of Tanzania.
I'm going to ask you 2 big picture questions as we start to look ahead to the year that will be, and of course the competition, which will be taking place next year, December and January. Looking at teams like Nigeria and Tunisia, both laboring not really looking great at the minute. Not that they have to, I guess, because it's still some way off. But what's your read on them?
Yeah, look, I think these are two teams that have been stalling for quite some times in the big picture. Now the difference is Nigeria have this incredible talent pool. You know, they still have superb players, and we saw that at the Afcon. The likes of Victor Osimhen, you know, Troost-Ekong was excellent. Ademola Lookman was, you know, nominated for the Ballon d'Or. But if you kind of take a wider lens and ignore their Afcon, which, you know, it's hard to ignore, obviously, because they did very well at it. They got to the final. But things have been in decline, and they're similar to Ghana, mismanaged, you know, badly run, players going on strike on the women's side of the game, threatening to do it on the men's side regularly, lots of issues. And we've seen that again in this kind of qualifiers. Yes, they kind of, in the end, did it comfortably, you know, in quotes, they topped their group and qualified with 2 games to spare, but they lost their last game at home to Rwanda, which is, you know, incredibly embarrassing. They drew with Benin in the other one. And obviously they got the walkover against Libya away, but they only beat Libya 1-0 at home. You know, if they had to play that game against Libya, you wouldn't be surprised if they lost it. And suddenly they lose that, and they're on level points with Benin and Rwanda and Libya. All the teams would be on 8 points. So suddenly they're scraping to get out of that group. World Cup qualifiers have gone really, really badly for them so far. I can't remember exactly how they've done, but they drew at home with Lesotho, I think. They drew with both Lesotho and another, I think, Zimbabwe. You know, they've gotten off to a really bad start. I think they're in South Africa's group, so you'll probably know better than me, but it's not looking good. Whereas Tunisia, I think they're in almost a worse case with Nigeria, because although it's maybe not quite as chaotic as Nigeria, the federation is a bit of a mess. Things are being mismanaged. We're seeing, you know, manager sacked, you know, mid Afcon qualifiers, as we saw this time. Things didn't change. And it kind of feels like Tunisia as a footballing country is on the decline. Unlike Nigeria, it's hard to see how they kind of pull out a big Afcon performance. Look, you know, far be it from me to underestimate them, because they're a classic team that wants you to underestimate them, and then suddenly they'll be in the semifinal somehow. But it feels like they're struggling. Whereas Nigeria, because they have players like Osimhen, Lookman, you know, and Alex Iwobi, you know, when you go through their team, they have such an incredible team. Victor Boniface, who didn't even play at the last Afcon, you know, exciting players like Rafael and Nyadinka coming through, and it makes you think, okay, this Nigeria team can beat anyone on their day, but they can also lose to anyone on their day, as we've seen against Rwanda. So it's Nigeria kind of, but this is the Nigeria we've known for the last kind of decade. You know, they're so hit and miss. They're so exciting and terrible at the same time. So I'm excited to see them at the Afcon, because you expect the same. Either they'll thrill or they'll be disappointing. But whereas Tunisia, I feel like it's a darker picture. I think they'll struggle more.
Got you. Well, let's look ahead. My final question of the pod to you is, Senegal, Morocco, are they shaping up to be the two teams that will be number 1 and number 2 contenders? You could flip them either way. How do you see those powerhouses?
Yeah, Zayn, I mean, I don't want to speak too soon, because those are the 2 favorites I had at the last Afcon, and obviously neither of them even made it to the quarterfinals. So I don't want to speak too soon. But I think one thing that Morocco and Senegal have perfected, which I think is so important as a national team, is the art of qualification. You know, I think Morocco won obviously Morocco had a very easy group, Gabon, Lesotho, and CAR, but they won all their games, 18 points. Senegal, if they win today, they're playing their final game against Burundi. They'll have won every game bar 1 draw against Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso are a good team. So I think those teams have shown, you know, those are well-run federations. That's how you do it. I think with Senegal, there were question marks over what would happen when Aliou Cissé stepped down. Obviously, legend, titan of the African game, will go down as kind of one of the greatest figures in Senegalese football. Obviously won them their maiden tournament and has been brilliant for them. But there were question marks. Okay, what's it going to look like after them? Pape Thiaw has come in. Obviously, he won the Chan with their kind of under-23s local-based team, and he's been brilliant since he's come in. He's not put a foot wrong. If anything, they're looking more exciting. They're looking like they're an attacking side. They're, you know, bringing in more exciting players. You know, we saw Lamine Camara at the last Afcon kind of stepping up, becoming this, you know, thrilling midfielder. They've already got players like, you know, Pape Sarr, Gay coming through. Habib Diarra was the kind of standout of this last game. He came in, kind of, again, young 20-year-old at Strasbourg in France, scores the winner against Burkina Faso away. So for me, it feels like both Morocco and Senegal are are cooking. I think Morocco will be the favorites because obviously they're playing at home as well for the next Afcon. And, you know, like, I just cannot wait. That opening game, that atmosphere in that kind of stadium, wherever they play, whether it's in Rabat or Casablanca, it's going to be incredible. And I think Morocco you're going to be hard pushed to find anyone to compete with them. You know, Cote d'Ivoire have got off to a good start in the World Cup qualification, but haven't been great in the Afcon qualifiers. You know, lost to Zambia, lost to Sierra Leone, a couple surprises. Whereas Senegal have been straight shooting. So I think for me, if you had to twist my arm and say early predictions a year ahead of the tournament kicking off, I would say Morocco would probably be my favorite, and Senegal kind of right behind them. But it's
underestimate South Africa.
Exactly.
One Hugo Bruce, who's likely to be the longest-serving Bafana manager at that point.
And Zayn, this is the thing I love about African football, because we're talking about all this, and so much can change in a year, and you've seen so many countries developing over the last year. You know, I think of DRC, I think of Angola, teams that have developed, teams that suddenly no one wants to play them. Even Mali under Tom Semphiet has now come in. They've gotten off to a great start with him in charge. Even Cameroon, look, Cameroon, you know, as they say, you know, that's where they thrive when things are at their most chaotic. And, you know, under Mark Briss, they're looking good. Look, they put us out comfortably. You know, and Vincent Aboubakar, I think, is now only 10 goals behind Samuel Eto'o on the all-time goal-scoring list for Cameroon, which is just phenomenal achievement. Algeria look like they're kind of coming back into it, you know, rebuilding after kind of some horrible years in the wilderness. So, like Zayn, I love it because, you know, we can have our favorites in Morocco and Senegal, and yet, South Africa might win it. You know, DRC might win it. You know, who knows? Zambia might win it again. You know, this is why I love the Afcon more than any other tournament in football.
Ali, certainly fantastic hearing your analysis and perspective. We have so much to look forward to. And listen, as we head into the new year, wonderful storylines to explore. And I'm sure we'll debate internally who wants to be in Morocco at Christmas. By the way, there's probably a lot of takers within the pod, Ali.
Then there's no debate. We'll all be there. Easy.
We have 2 potential trips to Morocco.
Exactly.
But Ali, why don't we leave it there? Thank you for your analysis. And if you want to tell us what you think about what Alasdair said or what I've said, or get in touch with any questions or thoughts, please leave a comment, leave a rating, leave a review. Let us know what you think. And again, a reminder, hit us up on our social media accounts at OTW_podcast. Enjoy the week, everyone. Alasdair, it's been a pleasure talking. Take care, my friend.
You too, Zayn, as always.